Hello, welcome to another video by LSX Engines Tuning Marine. Just documenting what's connected to this motor while it's still in the boat. There's 3 wires landing on this stud here. That terminal, this terminal here, there was a terminal, I guess there's a terminal inside the boat, and then the battery ground. There was 3 ring terminals on this stud. One of them was the battery ground, one was that one, and another was, I guess, a harness left in the boat. All right, the boat harness connected right there. The starter is a heavy gauge red wire connected to the starter right down there. That was there was some other wires landing on the starter also, but that was the only one that was still left in the boat. The fuel line was attached right there. The rear 2 motor mount bolts were here and here, and the front motor mount bolts were right down there and there, and that was it. And then oh, power steering hoses. So I had to disconnect the power steering hoses, which are right here. I've got them kind of tied up around in this car fuel line, but these are manual connection, flared what's called GM sagging off fittings, which I don't like. There's another fitting that's a quick connect. You just pull up on a little sliding device like an air connection, and it slides out. Those are better. But anyway, that's what it is. So the motor's out. I'm about to disassemble the back of it. I'm going to take all the bolts that are holding the bell housing on, including some kind of plastic guard on the bottom. They call it a gravel guard, but there's no gravel in the boat, so I'm not sure what that's about. But anyway, I'm going to disconnect those. Then when I get the bell housing off, I'll take the engine coupler off and the flywheel. Then I can put this engine on an engine stand and put it inside the shop. I now have the bell housing off the 4.3 liter V6 engine, and I've exposed the coupler, and based on what I'm seeing, I would say this coupler needs to be replaced. Can't tell if the rubber's deteriorated, but the metal outside is very rusted, and I don't know if it would stay intact under heavy load. But if this is my boat, I would replace this coupler. All right, I now have the engine mounted on the stand, and I'm about to take off the first items. So first I'm going to get this chain off, and then because the power steering cooler is right down there, there's a line going to the cooler. The cooler's, this is the first time I've seen it mounted down there, and the cooler's attached to this engine bracket here. I want to keep the cooler intact with the power steering system so I don't leak fluid everywhere. So I'm going to leave the cooler there, and I'm going to take this hose loose here and keep the hose with the cooler. Then once this hose is free, I will take the thermostat housing off and take the rest of the hoses with it. And that'll free up some space. So all I've done so far is remove this clamp. I'm going to pull this line off, and that'll free the cooler up to go with the power steering pump. And then I'll do the thermostat housing. All right, before I take the thermostat housing off, there's a brown wire going to a temperature sensor from this side, and just like another tan with blue stripe to this side. In my experience, this is your alarm switch, and this is the temperature sending unit. And pull both of those off. And then I'm gonna lift the thermostat housing should come off. Well, I'm gonna knock it free, but I'm gonna take the thermostat housing off now. All right, the thermostat housing uses one of those gaskets with the brass rivets in it. Also the hose for the, I guess you call it the driver's side, what I call the driver's side hose going down to your exhaust manifold. Went down through here, came out there above the alternator, and went over to your exhaust manifold. Just checking out some of the rust on these heads here. All right, thermostat housing is now removed. Now I'm trying to get the water pump off, and there's nothing left to the head of that bolt. It's rusted just about completely off. Same with this one over here. I got the upper bolt out, but the bottom is too far rusted. I'm gonna use my Irwin grip, bolt grip or grip right, whatever it's called, to try to get these out. All right, the alternator has been removed. The pivot bolt went through there. This is your mount, your adjusting bracket. That bolt may be too rusted to get off. I'm gonna try Irwin grip right, but not sure if I can get it out. So alternator's out. I'm now going to do the power steering pump. All right, this is the routing of the power steering. This is your supply. It's coming along here. It's routed right down through here between the right above the valve cover and this bracket. And then it goes underneath that relay and circuit breaker. Comes between the coil and the distributor, and then went on back there to the power steering device. Shit, spilling fluid everywhere. It's got a tie wrap tying the two together. I'm going to cut that so I can get this off. Continue with the teardown of a 4.3 liter Mercruiser V6. The front of the engine has been dismantled. The time to cover the water pump finally was removed by wedging the screwdriver behind the water pump and just pulling it off and breaking the head of the bolts off. But anyway, I got the water pump off, and then I loosened the timing cover bolts, or took the timing cover bolts out and removed the timing cover. Doesn't look too bad inside. The chain is typical wear from the timing chain, but I'll be replacing that. At this time, we're now going to proceed moving to the back. I'm going to take the fuel system off. This fuel pump unbolts right here off the two motor mount bolts, and then this whole assembly and the fuel line will come off with it. Moving around to the back, I notice this is a Thunderbolt 4 ignition system. I'm going to advise the customer to replace this with a Delco EST distributor, and I'm about to take the cap off to clean this thing up, make it a little bit less busy. Then I'll get the rest of the harness off, and then take the carburetor off, and this thing will be down to a long block ready to be stripped down. So if there's anything unique or odd about this teardown, I'll stop and video that. Before I move the wires off this oil pressure switch, I want to document how they go. There's a purple wire on the left, and not sure what color that is, blue maybe, this one here. But can't really tell. It's got two purple wires on here. Now this one here's got a stripe, it's like a yellow stripe, and this one doesn't appear to have a stripe. So stripe over here, not a stripe over here. It's the wiring at the starter. You have an orange and a red lead on the main battery lug there, and then you have a purple yellow stripe on the starter cylinder there, and a yellow with a red stripe on. I think this is the start. This is the start signal, and that provides power to your system when the ignition, in start mode only. So about to take these off on the starter. All right, we're now at the stage of this teardown where I've got the cylinder heads off, the valve tray removed, and so far the only major damage I'm seeing is a little bit of rust in that cylinder, which is not too bad. There's no evidence of any freeze damage, any cracking that I can see anywhere due to freezing. None there. I was looking at those rust trails right there, but it didn't look like it's cracked. None over here. The major damage to this engine is from having standing water in this cylinder right here. This is the worst one. I don't know if that can be saved with a 30 overbore. It might be saved with a 40 or 60 overbore, but I doubt if 30 is going to do it. So this engine may have been okay. I don't see any freeze damage on the outside of the block, or on the other side, no freeze damage. So it's a shame this engine may have been damaged by just leaving water or letting water get into this one cylinder. I don't know how it got in there yet, but I'm going to keep taking it apart until I find out. Just want to show you a little trick. So right now I'm removing the rod bearing cap off, and I'm going to knock this piston out from the other side. These journals are in pretty good shape, so protect the journals, especially if you think instead of turn these journals, you might just have them polished or not even do anything to them. These journals are in really good shape. So you don't want to nick these journals. So what I do is I take the old bearing and just kind of slide it between the bearing and the bolt, and put pressure on this bolt, pushing it against this old bearing to protect that crank. and I just lightly tap on that with a wooden mallet until I knock it out far enough to where it doesn't touch the journal anymore. And I let this bearing rotate along the journal to protect it while this bolt can tap that old bearing, but it won't hit the surface of the crankshaft to protect it. So I use this as a protector for the crankshaft. It's a little bit faster, or it's actually quite a bit faster than trying to slide rubber pipes onto these bolts to protect the crank when you push it out. You just got to be very careful and make sure you put a lot of pressure, downward pressure on this onto that bearing, so that this side here doesn't rattle up or vibrate up or rattle up and hit the crankshaft on that side. All right, I'm now done removing the pistons from this 4.3 liter V6, Mercruiser V6, and these journals are in excellent shape. I've felt them with my finger. They're very smooth. They don't even need polishing. This is one of the best teardowns of a 4.3 V6 I've come across, except for the rust in cylinder number, I guess it'd be cylinder number 6, right down in there. You see all that rust in there. Except for the rust in that cylinder, this engine was in pretty good shape internally. None of the pistons are scored. Everything looked good. It's a shame that somebody well, I don't know if somebody let anything. The water may have gotten in there some other way. I still haven't finished tearing it down. But I've seen no evidence of any cracks or any way that the water got into the cylinder number 6. So it may have a cracked block. I don't know. At this point, I'll have to let the machine shop tell me whether it's got a cracked block, because I don't see it with the naked eye. I'm now about to remove all the main caps and take the crankshaft out, and this teardown will be complete. Like I say, all the bearings, these are the rod bearings right here, and that was just a little dirty, but they're in good shape. None of them. Let's see what this looks like. A little bit of wear on that, but that's not too bad. Like I say, most of them were in excellent shape. Again, this is typical of the bearings. All of them are about like that, so they're in very good shape. The pistons were genuine GM, so I have a hunch this is the first time this engine's ever been apart. So anyway, I'm gonna finish tearing this down, take the crank out of it, and then this block will be taken to a machine shop. The block, and by the way, the heads, even though this is a Vortec engine, I'm going to verify it, but the heads have the 12 bolt intake pattern, so I have to use those heads. I can't use the 8 bolt heads with this engine because the customer's intake won't fit. So I've got to use the heads that came off this engine, and I'll explain that in another video. But for now, I'm about to take the crank out, and then this teardown will be done. I now have the main bearing caps taken off this 4.3 liter Mercruiser V6, and the main journals are in excellent shape also. There's no scoring on that one. There's just a little bit of scoring right there. I can't feel it with my fingernail, but there's a visual line right there where there's something got into the oil and came here and scratched this surface, but it's so minor. If you can't feel it with your fingernail, it's really not worth dealing with, or really not worth trying to repair. So this one here is in good shape. I don't feel any scoring at all on that one. And the same with the front one, no scoring. So this crankshaft is good to reuse as is, in my opinion. So let me show you the condition of the bearings. So here's your main bearings. This is number 1. That's number 1. It's got a little bit of a score right there in the middle of it, but again, it's not worth, this engine still had plenty of life in it. That was number 1. This is number 2. Again, this is the one that had the lines on the crank, but not bad enough to require a rebuild at this stage. This is number 3. It's in great shape. And this was number 4. This is your thrust bearing, and it was in good shape too. Just one single line down the middle. I can't even feel it with my fingernail. This bearing barely has the original surface worn off of it, so all these main bearings are in excellent shape. So this engine could have kept going had it not had water not gotten into cylinder number 6. So this also shows that a 4.3 V6 is a pretty stout motor. These bearings are in good shape. I don't know how many hours are on this boat, but the boat's a pretty old boat. It's before 1995, I'm sure, because the heads are 1995 and earlier. So, and if this is the original engine, these bearings are in pretty good shape. So that concludes the teardown of this 4.3 V6. I'm going to pull the crankshaft out, and I'm going to put the bearing caps back on, because the machine shop told me they want the bearing caps mounted back on the block so they can keep track of them. when you rebuild an engine, you want to put these are your main bearing caps. This is number 4. This is a V6, so there's only 4. On a V8 to V5, but this is your main bearing caps. This is number 4, number 3, number 2, number 1. And when you rebuild them, you want to, or when you put it back together, you want to put the caps back in the same place they were before. So you have an arrow that tells you what the front is. There's an arrow there, and then the arrow there. However, there's no numbers on these. It doesn't tell you which one's 1, 2, or 3. 4 is obvious because it's odd shape, but 1, 2, and 3 are very similar. So how do you know which ones are what? Well, most rebuilders will take a stamp, put a stamp number 3 here, a number 2 there, and they may leave 1 off because 1's obvious if 2 and 3 are stamped. That leaves 1. But in the case of this engine, this engine, in my opinion, has never been apart before. The bearings were standard, the pistons were GM, original GM, so this engine has never been torn apart before. So these bearing caps are not stamped. So when I took them off, I put them in order on that cardboard box over there. But while I was working on this, 2 of them slid off onto the floor, and I don't know what order they were in after that. So I had no idea which order they go to put it back in. However, there's a little trick. So if you look inside the bore here, this bore was machined and it left machine marks inside on the surface. So what you try to do is match up the machine marks as best you can. Like if you look real close, you can see right in there. See if I can keep my finger in here. Right there, running right up through there is a group of lines, and they continue from the block up into the cap. So that's how you can identify which bearing cap was on which. If you were to mix them up, you would see the lines don't really match up. So I think that was good. There we go. We got it in focus. So if you look carefully, you can see how my lines are a little bit matching up there. Right in there. So that's how you identify the cap if you get them mixed up on the block. So just want to give you a little tip on that. The best bet, if you don't see marks, is go ahead and take your punch. Take a punch and put, like, say maybe 1 dot here and 2 dots there. You don't have to do 3 because 3 is obvious. 4 is unique. So if you punch 1 and you punch 2, 1 dot on 1, 2 dots on 2, you don't have to punch 3 at all. So that's one way of marking the main bearing. That's how I do it when I don't have marks. On this particular engine, I forgot to do that. So fortunately, I was able to get these caps identified. So that's one tip. The other thing I wanted to show you is, so this engine had some rust in cylinder number 6. I'm fixed to pull. I'm gonna spin it back over and show you what it turned out to look like once the piston was pulled out of it. These engine stands are pretty cool. So here's the inside of the bore. You see there was a, let's back up a little bit. There was rust in there. So if I put my finger in and feel around, it doesn't feel as bad as it did or as it looked when the piston was inside the bore. It's still bad, but it doesn't feel quite bad. However, I'm not so sure that could be cleaned up with 30 thousandths. Let me show you why. So here's a dial caliper. So 30 thousandths overbore means, until I get it in focus. There we go. 30 thousandths overbore means it's only 15 thousandths per side. It's 30 thousandths diameter, so you're looking at 15 thousandths per side. Well, let me see if you can see what, that's 15 thousandths right there. That's not a lot, folks. Not a lot of metal being removed there. That's 15 thousandths. So 15 thousandths removed from that surface won't get rid of that pitting right there, that rust. Just have to be bored over to 40 or possibly 60. The machinist can tell. He's got enough experience to look at that and say, yeah, 30 thousandths overbore is not going to clean that up. So let me show you what the max you can go to is 60. So if you go on out, that'd be 30 per side. So if we go to 30, that's how much you can take off on a 60 thousandths overbore. Again, so in my mind, that's not a lot of metal either. But hopefully that will clean up any rust in your bore that you have. If it won't, you can't use that block. That block's trash. So this was the worst one. The rest of them don't have hardly any rust at all. They're still pretty smooth. But this one here had significant rust, especially right up in there. So we'll see if the 30,000 overbore can clean that up, or if not, we'll have to go to 60. Yeah, I need to find out what that black mark is in there. I hope that's not a hole right in there. I need to find out what that is. Hopefully it's just a speck of paint or something. But anyway, just want to let you know what a 30,000 overbore, how much it really takes off, and honestly it's not a whole lot. So if you got a bore that's severely rusted, the block can't be saved. I think this one is going to be borderline. If it won't go to 30, I'll see if it'll go to 40, and not 40, I'll go to 60. I don't think they sell a 50,000 over piston, never seen one. So that's some extra footage for this video. Hope you enjoyed it. Subscribe to my channel if you find this stuff useful, and good night.